figured out what your tasks are to protect your time, then we move on to identifying limiting habits. So some of you may remember that several years ago, there was a story about a man, I think it was in Japan, who found that food was missing from their kitchen every now and again. And this had been going on for an extended period of time. I believe it was around a year or so. And so this man put a security camera in their kitchen. And on reviewing the footage, they found that there was actually a homeless person living inside some sort of cupboard or attic space in their house. And they were coming down at night to take the food, which is, number one, horrifying, but number two, not something that you would normally think of. You wouldn't normally think that when food goes missing from your home, that therefore there is a homeless person that's living somewhere in your home for the last year that has been eating it. It's not a natural thought to have. So what we want to do when it comes to limiting habits is we want to identify what are the things that are escaping our radar that may be coming out without us realizing it to steal the food, to sabotage our progress. And we want to put a security camera on it right now to identify what those limiting habits might be. Because if the security camera wasn't up, maybe this man would have thought that, well, it's just one of those things that happens. Just food just goes missing from my kitchen. Maybe if this person just grew up in an interesting way in society, they just would come to develop the belief that food just goes missing sometimes. It's just one of those things that happens, like they have their friends over and their friend says, hey, can I, grab a drink from your fridge? And, oh, yeah, go get it. It's in the top shelf. And they open up the fridge and say, hey, your fridge is empty. And it's like, just one of those things that happens, like my fridge just makes food disappear every now and again, you know how it is. It's one of those things. And then the friend would look at him and say, no, I don't know what you mean at all. But actually, we have that same belief when it comes to some things, right? For example, socks. We just have this accepted belief that socks just go missing sometimes. It's just one of those things that happen. And we know that it's not just dematerializing into the ether. We know that it's probably behind the washing machine or, the dog chewed it up and buried it in the garden or something. We know that it's somewhere, but we just accept that it's one of those things. And likewise, we can actually form these beliefs about ourselves and our ability. We can start forming beliefs over time that I just can't do this. I'm just not the type of person that can exercise regularly. I'm just not good at studying. I just can't sit and concentrate. I'm not really good at reading from a book. I'm not so good at paying attention in class. I don't really do well when I'm sitting down in a library. We can form these limiting beliefs about what we can and can't do and what we're good at or not good at based purely on the fact that we're potentially using a system and a habit of techniques and approaches that is self-sabotaging, and we may completely not realize that that's the case. So here are a few prompts to get you started. How do you tend to respond when you're in time pressure? When you're running out of time, how do you tend to respond to that? How do you tend to respond when you're stressed? How do you tend to respond when you feel tired? How do you tend to respond when you are in a bad mood? And how do you tend to respond when you're being pushed outside of your comfort zone? These are potentially limiting habits. They're subconscious autopilot processes that often go on without us realizing it. It's a very fast process. It's usually automatic. We don't know what's going on. We are completely usually unaware of it until we really focus and critically reflect on it. We want to think how we tend to respond to these. Limiting habits and identifying limiting habits is one of the best things that you can do for your medium and long-term success. Probably the most common reason that people don't do well going through this program is because the techniques that we teach and the approaches that we teach are not brainless to do. They do spark discomfort. They do induce what we call cognitive load. It's something that makes us exert energy and brain power, and it can make us feel tired. The process of actually doing it, especially if you have years and a long history of very passive or linear learning strategies, it can be very involved and so engaged to the point where it feels uncomfortable. There can even be insecurity at the fact that you're using this technique that's so different from what you're already using, and you may have that fear of failure kicking in again. At those times when we're maybe time pressured, stressed, we're feeling uncomfortable, we need to know how we tend to respond to that. What I've found over the years is that there are students, not just students, but just of all, people of all ages, when they encounter these situations, they can often revert back to something that makes it a little bit more comfortable for them. So, for example, instead of using a particular technique that we teach, when it gets difficult and uncomfortable, they may actually start modifying that technique, deviating from exactly how it's meant to be done, and making it a little bit easier for themselves to avoid that discomfort. And many times, they're completely unaware of the fact that that deviation has bypassed the most effective part of the technique. So this is the reason, especially going through this program, we need to be very aware of the limiting habits. There are people that can be practicing and using the techniques again and again and again for months, and they get very frustrated and demotivated because they're not making progress. And when we sit down and really evaluate what they're doing and the approach that they're taking, they weren't actually practicing the technique. They went in with the intention of practicing the technique, but every time they sat down and practiced it, when they encountered that new cognitive element that they weren't used to, instead of pushing through, feeling it out, and then developing that into a new habit, they kind of just reverted back and modified to what they're more used to. And because they're not aware, they think every session they're going in trying to use this technique, and they're consistently not getting the outcome. But actually, the reason is because the technique itself was modified. So think about those limiting habits, how we tend to respond to those things. You can think of other limiting habits that you might have as well. This could be things like anxiety or fixed mindset, or an aversion response to fear, or fear of discomfort, or fear of failure. It could just be that when you're in a bad mood, you get more tired, or you just feel like you procrastinate more when you're not feeling, the best, or if you're tired, you tend to procrastinate more. These are all very common things, and they're very normal. Every human being has limiting habits. We can't often do anything about them straight off the bat, but it's important to recognize them, because then we can start making the next part, which is scripted actions. Scripted actions are automatic responses that we have pre-programmed that we can initiate when we notice that we have fallen into a limiting habit. So if you're in a hospital and someone is going into a cardiac arrest, then there is a protocol in place. Doctors and the nurses and the intensive care specialists, they come in and, they'll assess the situation, and they're very fast to act. No one is thinking, okay, well, cardiac arrest, okay, that means that the heart is not working correctly, and that could be because of this or this. So, maybe the best drug to give in this situation is going to be this thing, but the side effect of that will be No one is going through that thought process. There's an algorithm that everyone is trained in and needs to demonstrate competency in to actually maintain a medical license. So if that situation were to arise where there is a life or limb threatening situation, people can jump into action. There's no thinking time required. There's no delay. That's the importance of a scripted action. Because limiting habits are habits, they're automatic, autopilot, subconscious processes. They happen too quickly to prevent from happening. It's very difficult to catch a habit before it has already been initiated. The time delay between something triggering a habit and the habit being executed can be less than a second. It's not realistically possible to interject and prevent the habit from initiating. What we can do instead is try to build up a secondary set of habits that counteract the initial habit that we didn't want. So, for example, if we know that every single time we are feeling tired, we tend to procrastinate, every time we notice that we have fallen into that procrastination pathway, then we may make certain scripted actions that are designed to break us out of that procrastination pathway. The key here is that scripted actions need to require close to zero effort. So let me give you an example of one of my favorites. I'm about to demonstrate to you my go-to favorite scripted action for when I realize I am procrastinating, usually watching like Netflix or scrolling around on social media or something without me intending to. So the habit's already happened. I've got my phone out and I've realized, man, I've been scrolling around. I didn't mean to, but I've got my phone in my hand and I'm just looking at it. And I've now picked up on the fact that, hey, I've actually entered into procrastination pathway right now, and I want to break myself out of this. If at this point I'm needing to make the decision, how will I break out of procrastination? That's never going to work because I'm not even going to be willing to commit the energy to think about how to stop procrastinating. I've already lost that battle if I need to think about it. I need to have developed something now in a plan that's already set. So when I notice it, I just have to execute. So let me show you what it is. Let's say I'm looking at something like this, and I'm watching a video and I notice I'm procrastinating. Here's my scripted action. That. It was as simple as that. My scripted action, step 1, is simply to turn the phone down. I don't even turn it off. The audio is still playing. I can still hear it. But what I'm not doing is just letting things just go down the existing old pathway. I'm providing a break. Very low energy, very low motivation required to execute this break. But simply by doing this, it detaches me from that pathway. It gives me a little bit more control. And at that point, I might just lean back a bit, distance myself from a little bit further. Then I might use my other hand to just pause it and just put it down for a little bit. I'll stretch. I'll take a look around. I'll look outside. And the entire time, all I'm doing is the scripted action. I'm not thinking about, going and doing 3 hours of work, because as soon as I start thinking about that, it's overwhelming. I don't care about that at all. What I want to do is I just want to break this pathway. I want to be in control and decide what I want to do. Once that pathway is broken, I can sit there and think, okay, I'm no longer just like habitually drawn into watching this. I might say, okay, let me just go get a glass of water. And while I'm drinking the water, I'll make a decision. What do I want to do right now? Let me make a decision about that. Do I want to keep watching this? Or do I think what I should do is go do some work? And that gives me control over my situation again. And that helps to break that procrastination pathway. And the important thing is that by breaking it consistently over and over again, even if we decide to go back to watch it, then at least number 1, we're in control. And number 2, that habit of just procrastination is getting weaker because we're constantly disrupting it rather than continually reinforcing it. So this is a good way of breaking something like procrastination, but you can think of your own scripted actions for the types of limiting habits that you tend to have. The only key here is that it has to be very, very low effort, requiring almost no motivation. So make a list of scripted actions. What are you going to do to break that chain? And the next part is environmental optimizations.